From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
If I look at it from the top down, I get seriously depressed. The world's going to hell in a wheelbarrow. But if I walk out the door, turn all that off, and go with the people, whatever town I'm in, who are doing the real work down at the street level, like I say, there's too many good people doing too many good things for me to let myself be pessimistic about that. I'm hopeful. Can't live without hope, can you?
Utah Phillips, the legendary folk musician and peace and labor activist, has died at the age of 73. 4 years ago, in another key election year, I interviewed him at a pirate radio station in Santa Cruz, California. Today, we broadcast the interview for the first time. Utah Phillips on his music, his activism, the media, and what gave him hope. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The UN's top nuclear watchdog is accusing the Iranian government of failing to answer questions about its nuclear program. In a new report, the International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran should account for allegations of the military's role in developing nuclear power. No evidence has been presented of military involvement. Meanwhile, former President Jimmy Carter has revealed he believes Israel has at least 150 nuclear weapons in its arsenal. The Israeli government has never acknowledged its nuclear weapons program, but its existence has been widely known since the scientist Mordechai Vanunu leaked government documents in the 1980s. Carter's comments mark the first time a former U.S. president has spoken on the number of Israel's atomic weapons. Carter also called Israel's occupation of Palestinians, quote, one of the greatest human rights crimes on earth. The Pentagon's Inspector General Office has announced an internal probe into the military's domestic propaganda program. Last month, the New York Times revealed the Pentagon's accused retired military officers to generate positive news coverage and push for the war in Iraq. The move comes one day after the House approved a measure ordering investigations by both the Inspector General and the congressional investigative body, the Government Accountability Office. The House probe will focus on whether the program violates laws barring government funding of domestic propaganda. As the political use of former military officials comes under scrutiny, the Pentagon's now asking currently enlisted service members to stay out of politics. In an unprecedented open letter to all those in uniform, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, says, quote, the U.S. military must remain apolitical at all times and in all ways. It is and must always be a neutral instrument of the state, no matter which party holds sway. The U.S. Marine Corps has announced it won't bring criminal charges against 2 officers commanding a unit that massacred Afghan civilians last year. On March 4, 2007, several Marines opened fire on a busy highway near Jalalabad, killing up to 19 people and wounding 50 others. The Marines shot indiscriminately at civilian cars and pedestrians after an ambush on a U.S. convoy. In the statement, the Marine Corps says an inquiry had cleared the officers of wrongdoing. The Marine probe, 12,000-page findings, won't be publicly released. 12 South African nations have signed an agreement to increase political and economic ties. On Friday, leaders signed a treaty forming the South American Union of Nations, modeled partly on the European Union. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva said the grouping would increase regional integration.
Aquilo que parecia impossível aconteceu.
What seemed impossible happened. To the eyes of the skeptical, South America is today more integrated than ever. Because we have just approved by unanimity the Treaty of Integration, the Treaty of UNASUR.
O Tratado da Integração, o Tratado da UNASUR.
12 South American nations have signed the agreement. It falls short of plans to merge regional trading blocs, but ongoing proposals include the creation of a South American Defense Council. In Colombia, the founder and leader of the rebel group FARC, Manuel Marulanda, has died. Marulanda, known as Surashat, was 77. He had spent more than 40 years fighting the Colombian government from jungle and mountain camps. A guerrilla known by his alias Alfonso Cano has been named FARC's new leader. In Chile, arrest warrants have been issued for nearly 100 former soldiers and police officers under the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. It's the single largest mass arrest for crimes under the 17-year military rule that began with the overthrow of the elected Salvador Allende government in 1973. The suspects are accused of involvement in Operation Colombo, in which at least 120 dissidents were killed. Chilean Interior Ministry lawyer Boris Paredes says the government will press the case until the end.
Las investigaciones del ministro Montillo son investigaciones acusatorias.
Judge Montillo's investigations are accusatory investigations. Because of this, they give so much responsibility, which is logical here because the entire state conspired in this crime, in these horrendous crimes. Therefore, we will pursue criminal responsibilities to the end.
More than 3,000 people died under Pinochet's rule. He died in December of 2006 after evading numerous attempts to put him on trial. In Mexico, striking teachers have returned to the streets of Oaxaca. The teachers have led a 2-year campaign for better work conditions and the removal of State Governor Ulises Ruiz. This week, thousands of protesters occupied the main Zócalo Square. Striking teacher Octavio Cruz said the protest could last 3 weeks.
El plantón continúa de acuerdo a las medidas de las posibilidades que puedan.
The strike will continue until we are able to find a solution or get a response to any of our demands.
O dar a conocer alguna respuesta sobre nuestro pliego de demanda, ¿no? Sí, va a continuar el plantón hasta.
Yes, the strike will continue until we see fit. It is contemplated for another 21 days.
Contemplado para 21 días, ¿no?
The teachers are also demanding elections for a new union leader and the rejection of the energy reform that would increase private control of the state oil industry. In Cuba, former President Fidel Castro has criticized Senator Barack Obama for vowing to continue the U.S. embargo if he's elected to the White House. Speaking last week before the Cuban-American National Foundation in Miami, Obama said he would open diplomacy with Cuba, but maintain the embargo as a threat to win Cuban reforms.
Never in the lives of 2 generations of Cubans has the people of Cuba known democracy. This is the terrible and tragic status quo that we have known for half a century, of elections that are anything but free or fair, of dissidents locked away in dark prison cells for the crime of speaking the truth. I won't stand for this injustice. You will not stand for this injustice. And together we will stand up for freedom in Cuba. That will be my commitment as President of the United States of America.
In response, Castro wrote, while Obama is, quote, the most advanced candidate in the presidential race, his plan represents, quote, a formula for hunger for Cuba. In Iowa, 270 undocumented workers have been sentenced to 5 months in prison. The workers were arrested earlier this month in an immigration raid on a meatpacking plant. It was described as the largest single immigration raid in U.S. history. More than 10% of the town of Postville, Iowa, were put behind bars. Attorneys for the workers accused the government of violating due process rights by barring meetings with their clients and ignoring immigration laws. The hearings took place at a fairgrounds usually used for exhibiting cattle where the workers were held. Only a small number of the workers were found to have criminal records. No charges have been filed against the owners of the meatpacking plant, agri-processors. In Burma, the UN says the military junta has continued to deny unfettered access to areas devastated by the cyclone. Aid officials have been barred from several parts of the Irrawaddy region where the cyclone's impact was worst. At least 130,000 people are dead or missing. Meanwhile, in China, the government's warning up to 1.2 million people could be evacuated from a region threatened by a new barrier lake formed by this month's earthquake. The water buildup could lead to dangerous flooding and cause a new crisis. In Burma, the junta has extended the house arrest of the pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party won national elections in 1990 but was kept out of office by the junta. She spent 12 of the last 18 years in detention. In South Korea, at least 29 protesters have been arrested in a protest against an agreement on importing U.S. beef. The South Korean government's decision to ease restrictions has sparked a national crisis. Thousands turned out in the capital, Seoul, this weekend amidst fears of another outbreak of mad cow disease. U.S. lawmakers had threatened to withhold a pending trade deal unless South Korea accepted U.S. beef. And the American film director and actor Sidney Pollack has died. He was 73 years old. Pollack's films included Out of Africa, Tootsie, and The Way We Were. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm